today. And thank you for staff for preparing a great spreadsheet and the PowerPoint that we're going to see today. A lot of work went into that, and I think it's pretty impressive to look back at the amount of work that we've already done and how far we've came in a pretty short period of time. So I appreciate that, and I know I was impressed as we get into the slide presentation, the amount of comments, how deep people have been diving into some of that work. So really appreciate everybody's work up to this point, and just an acknowledgement of how far we've came. So thank you for that. I think next up on our agenda for today is approval of the March 27th meeting minutes. Did everybody have a chance to review those, or did anybody not receive those? Okay. Hearing none, could I get a motion to approve the March 27th minutes?
Brian Stewart, so moved.
Okay.
Second, Koenig.
All right, thank you, Carl. It's been moved and seconded to approve the March 27th minutes. If anybody is opposed to that, please say so now. All right, then I would say that our minutes from March 27th are unanimously approved as submitted. So thank you for that. All right, I think we're up to the next agenda item, which is to review the 478 follow-up sections. And Adam, is this going to be the PowerPoint presentation, or are you going to the spreadsheet for this one?
Yeah, I think we can jump to the PowerPoint presentation, but yeah, so just very quickly, thank you, Chief Johnson. There is an email that went out this morning that had all the materials attached to it that you've seen over the past couple of weeks, each material individually, but it had the two items that Chief Johnson just mentioned. One is the PowerPoint for today that we'll go through, but the other one, and unfortunately we can't do a split screen, is really good to look at, and that's the Excel document that many of you have seen and looked at in the past, which just really shows each of the sections that we've gone through over the last 4 or 5 months, and if there is any sort of recommendation related to it, it shows that as well. And so it's a really good document to kind of see our progress. And if you have the ability on your screen to see that, open that up as well as we go through the PowerPoint, that could be helpful as well to just track our progress. But I will open up the PowerPoint here and we can start moving through. All right. So all of the sections have been reviewed and looked through by this group over the last few months. Thank you very much for all of your work and time in those. There are a number of sections that we will revisit today that there wasn't a recommendation made for the section. And there's, I think, 4 slides here that have the different sections outlined in summary, and then we'll go through each section. So here we have 7 sections. Then 7 more. Few more, and then I'll go to the last item. 3 more here. So 7, 7, 7, 21, 24. So we've got 24 different sections we'll be going through today. All right, so starting with the definitions section. This is a section that we started at the very beginning of this process and mentioned that we would come back after the review of the whole chapter was completed. And if there were any additional items that we felt needed to be added to the definitions section or removed, then we could make those changes. And so there's an opportunity now if anyone has any additions or changes that we could make note of. Otherwise, this is something that is still open that we could make changes to. I'll turn it over to you, Chief.
Okay, I'm just looking through the comments on it, and it seems like there's comments around agricultural, land clearing, burning, some of the terms around that. And I'm just wondering from staff's perspective, is there good alignment between 477 and 478 and responsibilities on burning and the definitions? From your perspective, is there more work that is needed there?
Yeah, we didn't identify any issues as we went through, but we could take a look at that and make sure that there aren't any moving forward as well. Take a deeper look.
Okay, and I think some of the, probably not the definitions, but there were restrictions as far as being out of scope related to agricultural burning and field burning, if I remember right. So we just want to make sure that we're in line there as well.
Absolutely.
Do any of the committee members have any comments on this slide? Okay, hearing none, I think we can move on to the next one.
All right. All right, so this formation, so 155, sorry, 110 was formation territories that may not be included in districts. And there was conversation about this, and it was split into a bunch of different sections. It was deemed that 2C was out of scope, and one section, 2A, was recommended by DOJ to leave as is. And I think the only sections that were left for further discussion were 2B and 2E. So I'll kick it over to Chief Johnson and the group.
Okay, so the 2B, I looked at that lighting district as well, and I think that's what that 264 is referencing. If we can go back one slide. Yeah, the 264-340. That was the lighting district that allowed for the creation of fire districts, wasn't it? Statute there.
Yeah, let me see.
To be territory within a water supply district. Yes. And I think the recommendation was that from Christie and DOJ that we just leave the lighting district piece alone.
It was.
Yeah. So unless anybody has energy on that, I think we can just cross that off the research list. And then 2D was the railroad right-of-way improvements. And certainly there's comment there about likely not being able to modify or tax the rail system. Likely wouldn't be a recommendation that would gain any ground. I'm just wondering if this could be a parking lot issue similar to Ocean Shores and how cost recovery is done maybe along these railroad right away. Maybe it's just sort of a parking lot item to have a discussion around billing and cost recovery in those areas. Anybody have any comments on 2D from committee members or staff?
I can move down to the text here too.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the center there.
All righty. All right, so we're talking about the 2D, the railroad right-of-way, and ocean shores. And these are lands that currently cannot be included within a fire district. I think the ocean shores is on sort of our parking lot list of items to talk about from a cost recovery standpoint. From our dot exercise, likely one of those broader funding areas.
Yeah, and Chief, as you just mentioned, there are a number of different items that will all end up in that conversation,
Right.
Which will likely occur at the next month's meeting.
Right. Okay. I think we just leave that in the parking lot for next month. I know there was some questions around definitions of landline, vegetation, estuaries, you know, how the taxing structure would work within that, but I'm comfortable leaving that if staff is and the committee is for discussions next month.
Chief Johnson, Travis, I think you're spot on. I think there's these multiple places across 478 that have these kind of same themes. Cost recovery is one of those that all connect back to the dot exercise, and it's in multiple places. And so I think the work that we can do is begin to, pull all of those into one place and then facilitate a discussion as we think about, the next meeting. And I think that may be helpful as we think about some of these topics where it may be in multiple places across the statute. And we maybe touched on it a couple meetings ago, and then another section, it comes up again, and how to kind of coalesce all those into one place and then have a conversation around what the desires are. And then, to build on that, I think the dot exercise highlighted a lot of these. And so, as we think about next steps and kind of aspirational, the future, how do we work and talk and think through that?
Yeah. Excellent. Well, unless anybody feels differently, I think we can move on from this slide. Does staff have what you need for follow-up on this one, Adam, then, or Travis?
Yeah, I believe so. So it seems like this section is being split up by 2C being out of scope, the rest of it leave as is, with 2D in the parking lot for the cost recovery conversation next month.
And I would say 2E, the ocean shores piece as well.
2E, sorry. Yep. Yep, copy. All right. Move on to the next one. All right, section 115, county governing board, governing body to determine territory of district. So this was something that the group had asked the committee to punt over to DOJ and asked Christy to look at what the county governing body was.
Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Christy.
So the county governing body is going to be the county commission, unless the county has defined it otherwise. So.
Thank you.
Usually it's the county commission.
So let me pull up the language here. See if folks have other questions here. Very simple text here.
Yeah, I think there were questions around, I think, essentially the authority of the county to do that, why they would add territory, you know, how this would come into play, I guess, within a district. Can a county force annexation or deny inclusion in a district without further cause, stipulation of process? And then another comment was, you know, as you can see, it's preferable that districts annexations would not be subject to county amendment. So I think, I'm not sure if there's an unresolved question there, Christy, of do we need to make a recommendation? Is this a problem statewide? I don't know that I've ran into it in the annexation work that I've done.
So what I have seen is when counties get involved, it's generally because either the district is defunct because it can't get enough people to run for office and seats are vacant, or the district can't make a decision for whatever reason and is charged with making a decision. The provision here, however, deals only with determining the territory of the district. And this statute is also subject to 478-010, which talks about formation, right? So I don't know when it would be used, but I'm guessing that it's during the formation process. And we do work closely, districts do work closely with counties when they're doing the formation process. And the districts provide the maps, etc. But because it's a county election, the county runs the election and creates the plats and determines the actual boundaries of the district. So I'm guessing that 478-115 is referring to that process. As far as counties having authority over districts, they don't for fire service issues unless you've got vacant seats or a dysfunctional county, and there are other provisions that allow counties to do that.
I see Carl has his hand up.
Thank you, Roger. Does this, I don't know if this counts, in this area where we had the ballot, or not ballot measure, we had the discussion about fire district property serving those within 7 miles of a fire station. Is this going to be in that area? You know, we had the proposal, and I don't remember the measure number, House bill number. Is this that where including properties into a fire district that's already existing?
I haven't reviewed that proposal. However, I'd be very surprised if it had anything to do with this statute.
Okay, then I'm good.
Yeah, because I think this was done in 1979, and Senate Bill 1068 is the new legislation that just went in, not last year, but the year before, I believe.
Right. Thank you for your excellent recall, Roger. Nice.
I'm not saying it's right. It's just a number.
It's just a number. Nice.
Okay. Any other comments on this one? I saw Genoa pop up.
Chief, you did my work for me.
Okay.
And I agree with Christy. I believe that it's only applicable at the formation unless there was a petition or a request or something, but I can't think of an instance where that would happen. So.
Yeah, in reviewing the statute and the history, what I determined was it's really just echoing what the county's elections duties are already for formations, mergers, things like that. Because the county is that keeper, that holder of where the boundaries are, what the authorities are, what the votes are, et cetera.
And that's likely this 198 reference as well. I mean, that
Yeah.
goes back to the formation of special districts.
Yep.
It's a little more broad than just fire districts.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments from the committee on this one? What I'm hearing is we likely can cross this off as no change recommended unless somebody feels differently. Okay.
Hearing no objections.
Let's go to the next one, Adam.
Right. All right, so the next section we wanted to come back to was 155, formation of district with tax zones, contents of formation petition and order creating district, determination of tax levy in each zone and boundary changes. And on this one, most of the sections were recommended to move forward as written. I think section 2, 3, 4, and 5. But section 1B and 1A and B, I believe, there were some questions about, and then just aligning section 6 with section 1. So, and we were just going to bring this back, I think, for the task force to just discuss. So, let me take a. Here's the language right here. And this could also fit into sort of the tax zone formation conversation, which is kind of a bigger item that we could come back to next month as well. But
yeah, I think it could be a dot exercise. I did do some outreach as well. There was a discussion, I think, at last month's meeting about the possibility of Crook County had used this. So I did speak with Chief Smith in Crook County about it, and their district originally had multiple zones. And the zones were more based on their service area or station service area. They didn't have different tax rates. And then when they reformed, they eliminated the zones, but they never had a differential tax rate within the zones of the fire district when they originally had those zones. So I'm personally comfortable with leaving it in the sort of parking lot and having a broader discussion about zones and tax rates, service areas as part of sort of that bigger picture look, if others are. Does anybody else have a question about this one or any comments about it?
Chief Johnson, Travis, thanks for chatting with Chief Smith. I know that was the only one that was identified by revenue when I talked to revenue, and that was followed by DID. So they didn't know of any other ones.
Yep. Okay.
all right. So what I'm hearing is without any proposed recommendations, we'll leave this as is and put it over in the conversation for the larger tax conversation.
Yep.
Right.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. All right, the next section is section 260. And 260 is fire chief headquarters, fire evacuation routes, emergency medical services. It looks like there was no recommendation to change the statute of section 4. And that was supposed to be moved forward as written, so section 4, but section 1, 2, 3, and 5 were left undetermined. And this was going to a subgroup where Chiefs Cook, Hussey, and Chief Johnson were involved, and there was a bit of a recommendation made in terms of language changes. So let me. Here we go. And so I believe that some of the conversation, staff conversation, we're saying maybe that the and assistant part could be removed. And then I think there was more conversation with that subgroup about whether this whole part of the sentence could be removed that's identified in the slide. And that's where folks got and wanted to open it up.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments about that, or subcommittee members want to speak to their work or thoughts on that one?
Yeah, Chief Ben Stange. One thing with the assistants, I had pointed out to me there are, or at least were, a couple Medford Rural and Medford Rural and Deschutes County Fire District 2, both contract for services with larger departments, but their board either does have or has had assistants that they have employed for that board that's contracting with the other fire district, but is working for the board of that contracting agency, which I thought was an interesting way to do it. I don't know if Genoa knows anything about that.
I'm hearing this for the first time, and my response is, oh no. I mean, nothing wrong with it. It's just it's just a scenario that I had not considered.
And I can speak to the Deschutes too. There is another hand there. I can't see who it is. Amanda, can you help me with that one?
Hey, Chief Brian Stewart, I've got my hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Chief Stewart.
Two pieces. One, I did some outreach, and Devin Brown mentioned that Medford 2, their board employees an assistant. So that was the one person that I'd heard from out of a bunch of outreach, and I had not heard about Deschutes 2, but it's out there. And then secondly, I guess I was trying to bounce between the Excel spreadsheet and then also the highlight there on the PowerPoint slide. So is the intent here that the subcommittee's recommendation is that someone trained as a firefighter, but not someone who may have spent a career in fire prevention would be eligible to become a fire chief?
Yeah, I think the discussion was maybe moving away from that specific title of firefighter, wasn't it? I mean, the board should be allowed to hire a CEO of their fire district, maybe without that experience. I see Christie's hands up, so she will solve this for us.
And just one comment. Sorry, Christy, to follow up. That was my recollection from the general discussion as a group. I just didn't know exactly where the subcommittee had landed. Thanks.
Christine?
So my understanding was that the group had decided to keep the language as is, that we had discussed about the vague phrase or otherwise allows us to hire a person who's trained in fire prevention or something else. And so we wanted to keep that or otherwise, even though we acknowledged it's kind of weird language. Secondly, we had concerns about whether the board should have the authority to directly hire and supervise assistants, volunteer, or otherwise, or assistants or volunteers. This portion of the statute is drafted pretty oddly. It can be read a couple ways, and I could argue up and down, and so can all other lawyers, that it could be read a couple ways. It could be talking about selecting a fire chief who has actual experience as a firefighter, and I guess as a person who is trained in fire prevention. And then it says, or otherwise, we talked about that. And then it says, and assistance, volunteer, or otherwise. And that assistance and volunteer otherwise was the topic of great discussion amongst the group.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Christy. And I am fairly familiar with the Deschutes 2 situation around the city of Bend. They essentially completely surround the city of Bend. They're a rural fire protection district. They have their own permanent tax rate, but they hire the city of Bend to provide service to all of their residents of the fire district. And then they have a managing director for the fire district. They have one single employee. They're considering adding another part-time employee. And the sole purpose of the employee, or I think would fit as an assistant under the statute to the board, is that they manage the contract between the two agencies. They monitor sort of the performance, they do the budget, they run the board meetings, and they do that for the fire district. The City of Bend fire chief is the fire chief for the district, but they do have this managing director position. It's a structure that they feel works well for them and they plan to continue. So I think we would need to be careful of changing statute that didn't allow for an existing structure that is functioning in the state. I see another hand up there.
It's Mike Hussey here. So a couple comments on Medford's. That's correct. The fire chief of the city of Medford serves as fire chief for Medford District 2. They've hired an assistant to do the books and maintain the board documents. Williams Fire up in the Applegate has a similar arrangement. They have a fire chief who does not conduct the work for the board. Instead, there's an assistant that reports directly to the board president and conducts the work on their behalf.
Okay.
And just to add to the discussion, the two sections from now, section 280 also deals with employment assistance as well. So we will, this is two sections that's together.
Okay, Christy?
I had one question. What's highlighted here on the screen in front of us, is that the proposal?
That was what some folks had discussed and were proposing.
Okay.
I thought we had just discussed the and assistance. That's what was on the last PowerPoint presentation, and it aligns with what was in the minutes.
That's my understanding also.
I believe there's also a subgroup, and maybe Chiefs Cook, Hussey, or Chiefs Cook or Hussey, and then I think Chief Johnson as well was part of this. We're looking at the language deletion as shown above, but.
I see Chief Darby with his hand up there.
Yeah, I think someone just mentioned it. I thought at the last meeting and just looking at the minutes that we were going to leave it alone. However, I think Chief Stewart brought it up. I'm not sure if we need to spend a little more time on this, because I know this was a subject when this first came out that I had a little bit of concerns about, because I know there are some fire marshals out there that have stepped into a career in fire prevention, basically have, to some extent, I mean, they might not even have a firefighter certification, but they've been put in the fire chief's role. So I don't know if we need to maybe still work on this a little bit.
Okay, Chief Hussey, you have a comment?
Yeah, I think we did work on that in the subcommittee, and inadvertently struck out "and person." I agree. It was intended to be inclusive, not exclusive, and it was addressed at more the assistants, volunteers, or otherwise. The second otherwise.
Okay.
What I'm hearing from the task force here is potentially that we just leave this as is, unless somebody would like to make a different proposal.
That's what I'm hearing too, with Christie's interpretation that the trained as a firefighter or otherwise would provide the flexibility of a fire marshal if a fire district wanted to hire somebody with a prevention background or business background. That would be allowed under the statute. So I think it provides that flexibility. And then just a recognition that there are assistants employed by the board in multiple fire districts around the state. So we wouldn't want to likely impact them. Christy?
I just wanted to clarify because not sure. Of course, the district employs everybody, but are there assistants that are actually hired by the board without the chief's say so? And are those assistants supervised only by the board without the chief's say so?
In Deschutes 2, yes.
My understanding, that's how Williams operates.
Okay. And those Deschutes 2 and Williams have a chief, right?
Yep.
Deschutes 2 sounds a little different because what they've done is they've.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Chief Johnson, this is Darby. So in Deschutes Rural, so they're not called the fire chief. That's just managing director.
Correct.
Gotcha.
But they're actually an employee, right? And the City of Bend fire chief is the fire chief for Deschutes 2. But the managing director does the board work, schedules the board meetings, does the budget and all of that work for the district, and ensures that the contract between the two agencies is fulfilled. So the district board has a representative that's looking out specifically for the interests of the district in this contractual arrangement.
That's interesting. Yeah.
All right. Adam, I think you're on the right track. Does anybody disagree with leaving this statute as it is? Okay. I think we can move on from that one, and we'll just remove the strike through and the highlight from that, right? We're leaving the original language.
Ty just raised his hand.
Darby, I see your hand up again.
Sorry, I don't want to beat a dead horse on this. I apologize, but so we're essentially saying that or otherwise would then kind of capture firefighter, fire marshal. Is that what we're going with?
That's my belief based on Christie's comments on that. Christy?
Yes, I just want to clarify though, that person would have to have actual experience as a firefighter and be trained in either fire prevention or something else.
That's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, I think Chief Darby, sorry, this is Ben. I think what I'm hearing from you is you would be more interested in wording that said something like actual experience as a firefighter or person who is trained in fire prevention or otherwise. Not and.
That's correct, Chief. Or maybe a generic, maybe fire service experience or
I think, Christy, is Christy, would the or otherwise just be person who's trained in fire prevention or otherwise, or is it firefighter / prevention or otherwise? Does that make sense?
Yes, I am now giving you an honorary first-year law degree. Just first year. That is the exact problem with this statute. We don't know what the phrase or otherwise is modifying. I argue that it only modifies the phrase directly in front of and. So it only modifies who is trained in fire prevention. Others could argue, maybe it modifies the whole thing and totally cancels out what's before it. I think that would be a less successful argument, but it is unclear and drafted in an odd way.
As a representative of OFMA, and to this extent, there are fire marshals, and I think Chief Stange, I think we have someone close to our service area who was a fire marshal who just became a fire chief. So city department, if you will, but I think there's value in maybe looking at this because that the fire marshal role is very similar to some extent on many cases to the fire chief role. And I know there's been fire marshals who have been put in those positions.
Okay. I see Chief Ruiz Temple's hands up there.
Thank you. I have spotty internet, so I'm just going to do audio. Just something to consider. There has been fire marshals that have been fire chiefs, to Ty's comment, as well as there have been fire chiefs that have no fire experience. That has happened in Oregon. And I would ask the group to consider how we maybe change the verbiage to get to the intent of what I think I'm hearing you all say, which is we want to be open to fire marshals and firefighters, right? And then I remember a conversation, Chief Johnson, that you said, or otherwise, meaning like leave it to the board. And so I don't know if it makes sense to kind of go back and forth with this sentence and what we strike or otherwise, or just be super intentional with what I think a modern Oregon Fire Service looks like. And I think what a modern Oregon Fire Service looks like is inclusive and allows the board to make the decisions that's right for their district. So those are my comments for consideration.
Thank you, Chief. And I think that's really appropriate, right? And I don't think the intent of this committee is to wordsmith the sentence and as much as it is to make a broad recommendation that the intent of the committee or recommendation of the committee that this statute probably needs modified to be more inclusive and more clear on what type of experience or what type of person the board can hire, I think is, and I think that's what we're all saying. But Chris, your hand up there.
Yeah, I think this may be an issue of having too few or too many Oxford commas.
We need a semicolon, but I digress.
I guess I did too. Sorry about that.
Okay, Chief Stewart, see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. I guess I would just reiterate my perspective is I think the wisdom of the board at the local level should have broad discretion in who they want to appoint. And I can think of a few examples across the state of non-traditional potential fire chiefs who have not been firefighters nor fire marshals. They may have fire service experience in the couple examples that I'm thinking of that would probably run around circles around, certainly me as well as others in terms of being able to manage a fire organization. So I would like to see it more broad than less.
Okay. That's my sense of the group. And Chris, I see your hand still up. Do you have another comment? Okay. Does anybody feel differently about the position that Chief Stewart just stated? And that I think we're in the same spot. I just want to provide one last opportunity. What I'm hearing is the intent is to broaden the statute to provide the board the flexibility to hire a fire chief of their choosing without the restrictions that currently exist in the verbiage of statute. Is everybody comfortable with that general approach and knowing that there'll be wordsmithing that has to go on to make that happen? All right, I think we're there, Adam. I appreciate everybody's input. Excellent feedback, so thank you.
All right, thanks for the conversation. We'll move on to the next statute. All right, 270. So this had to do with reporting, and I think the operative term here was monthly in the reporting. And so we had a group get together and talk about suggestions, and I think the suggestion was to just get rid of the term monthly. And there's the language right there.
Okay. And this was OSFM staff got together and discussed this, right, Adam?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
Is everybody comfortable with making a recommendation to remove the word monthly from the statute? Anybody object to that? All right, hearing none, I see Carl's hands up.
Yeah, are we concerned at all that everybody's gonna put the reports in on 12/31? And of what year? In regards to information that the state fire marshal generates a report on fire activity or incidents, whatever, what have you, whatever is within those reports. And that's really just, you know, guideline, you know, I guess, I don't know, that's what kind of what I'm thinking.
Adam, anybody from the office have a concern related around that?
Let's see.
I might.
Yeah.
This is Mariana. I might just offer 478-270 is not related to NFIRS. It's related to the district board shall report. So, Carl, it's not. And then, you know, I think I see Dr. Gemmel and in there, like, that's not what this is about. And I think the council, we had a hard time wrapping our arms around what does the district board currently report to the state fire marshal, and they don't, other than things that we request of them, like an annual survey or things like that. And so taking the word monthly gives flexibility to the agency to do the things it does, but not require it monthly. So it's separate and apart than reporting of NFIRS data.
Okay.
Eric, is that correct, Eric?
That's correct, Chief.
Okay, I sit corrected, no question.
All right, thank you for that clarification. All right, well, I think we're done with this one unless there are any last comments. I think we can move to the next one.
All right, so we'll be accepting that change. And then the next one is the second section that I mentioned that has to do with assistance. And this was the section, and the highlighted part is the sentence in question. So again, this was the subgroup. Chiefs Cook, Hussey, and Johnson were looking at this, and we're making a recommendation for this as well to remove this section, the highlighted section. But if you'd like to speak to that, that would be wonderful.
Well, I think we've had a discussion about that. I think when the committee met, I don't think we had as good a feel for the number of people that are using assistance across the state. And sort of learning more about that and the discussions we've had today, I think I would probably recommend that we leave it as is unless somebody feels differently. Does anybody feel strongly that we should change this? Okay. I think we can leave it as is and move ahead.
Great. Right. So the next section is section 310, response to fire or public safety incident outside of its own territory by district, municipality, and liability for costs. I believe both this and the next section that we'll look at was sent to a subcommittee in March, in February and March, and the staff, OSFM staff subcommittee was recommending leaving this as written.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the committee on the recommendation to leave as it is?
Move down to the text as well. All right. See. Yeah, hearing no objections, I think we'll leave that. The next section is section 315. And as I mentioned, this was also in that same category. This, however, is related to cost recovery, sort of a big topic that we will touch on in our kind of larger conversation next month as well. But this is response to fire, public safety incident in the Columbia River Gorge scenic area and payment of costs.
Yep. I think it's appropriate to have that as part of that cost recovery discussion going forward. Any comments from the committee on this one? Are people comfortable moving this forward into that more broad cost recovery discussion?
All right, looking good. Okay, the next section, section 340 is payment of premiums or charges on contracts, employee contributions. And this was another section that we kicked over to Department of Justice and Christie. And I believe we asked if they would look into the history of this, and it looks like the last update was in 1969.
That was a great year. So I don't recall being asked to look into the history of it. However, I did reach out to our labor and employment expert, and she provided me with some pretty detailed written advice just this week. I'd like to digest it and kind of summarize it for you in writing. I just haven't had the opportunity to do that. She is a former BOLI hearings officer, and I trust her implicitly with this information. I'm just a little bit behind the ball. I wasn't able to fully read it and grasp it and understand it and summarize it for you yet.
Okay. So we can leave this as pending for now for future follow-up next month.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, appreciate you reaching out, Christy, and getting an expert to help us with this.
All right. Are there any comments from the committee on just sort of any more direction or thoughts on this, or are we good to move forward? We're good. All right, so we'll move on to the next section here, section 410. Now, this is another one of those big topic discussions that we can talk about down the road relating to collecting costs, kind of adding teeth to collecting costs. But this was something that the subcommittee recommended that OSFM staff take a look at. And I think it was just designated to be kind of a big topic that there's no specific recommendation.
Does anybody have any thoughts or comments on this one? And this, most of the committee, of course, we only had 7 people weigh in on it. But there is the ability for a district to issue bonds, sell bonds. If this is the right one, I think it is. To borrow money to source general obligation bonds. Yeah, okay. So do we need more follow-up here, Adam, or group, or do we just make a recommendation that we move ahead with the existing language on this one?
Yeah, there were never any suggestions to either eliminate or change the language specifically. I think it was more a conversation around the topic was necessary.
Okay. maybe,
So-
yeah, okay.
But unless anybody has any specific changes that they were thinking about for this section, I think we would leave it as is and just bring it up in the conversation next month.
Yeah, I think that works. And if from the conversation, we have a recommendation that impacts any of these statutes, then we may go back and include that, right, as a recommendation that this could intersect with this section going forward.
Absolutely.
For now, I think leave it as is.
Okay, all right. And then the next section, section 470, interest on unpaid warrants, limitations on amount of warrants. This was something that we had wanted Department of Revenue clarification on. And I believe Travis reached out to Department of Revenue and might have an update.
Yeah, so the two revenue ones, I spoke to the first one. On this one, I reached out again and still haven't heard back. So I will follow up and make sure I have an answer for the next. There's been a change at DOR, and so working with that new person, I will get an answer for back.
Okay. So more to come in May.
Yeah. All right. So the next section is section 500. And this was a topic that came up that the committee recommended creating a subcommittee on 480, 490, and 500. I believe there was a letter that SDAO submitted on this. And maybe Chief Johnson, if you could speak a little bit to that, but otherwise I believe there were no recommended changes, simply that this was something that was not used and was very often, if ever, and this was just sort of a complex section.
Yeah, SDAO was not able to identify any districts in the state that had separate levy rates in zones. And I reached out to Mark Landauer and Frank, and they recommended that one of our own committee members might have the best perspective on that. They recommended we connect with Genoa and see if Genoa had any awareness of any districts divided into zones and having a separate tax rate within zones. Genoa, do you have any awareness of any of those?
Just the discussion, and not aware of any fire districts. I don't know if there are any other districts, but I'm not aware of any fire districts that charge different zones.
Okay.
I mean, even those that, you know, and I know Chief Stewart is on, but even those that are close to freeways like 205, I think they don't differentiate between what they charge. Does that make sense?
Yep. Some have different contract rates potentially, or they're a conglomeration or a consolidation maybe, or a 190 agreement that would have different rates of, like a fire authority type arrangement, different partners to that, but not a legal zone of taxing zone per se, likely.
Right. The costs are different, but from my understanding, it's not based on geography or zones. Yeah.
Okay. But this, I think, was going to be a parking lot issue for the DOT exercise potentially too, wasn't it, Adam? We were going to talk about, are there opportunities? When we think of enterprise zones, we think of potentially urban renewal districts. Are there opportunities to have different zones in different situations maybe? So I think it was going to fit potentially under the funding section of sort of the DOT exercise of future work.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can leave this for now and move that over into that tax zones funding conversation.
Okay. Anybody, is everybody comfortable with that? Any concerns about leaving this as is for now and moving to a broader discussion? Okay, let's move on.
Right. So the next couple sections were sent to OSFM to take a look at. And the idea was that maybe they needed some modernization or any sort of updates. On the next, I believe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think the next half a dozen sections were essentially recommended to modernize in some cases, but mostly leave as written. So this is the 920 scope of the fire prevention code, and modernizing this language and terminology was the recommendation by staff.
Okay.
No specific changes.
All right. And so no report back today from staff, Adam, other than just a recommendation to leave as is, or future work and future recommendations will be coming?
Yeah, I think it was just that kind of on a whole, we'd be looking at this and making sure that there were no small changes. But if there's anybody in that group that would like to speak up.
So I can jump into this. So 920 was not one that we reviewed in-house just yet. I think just taking a quick peek at this, I mean, it's really, you know what, we'll bring it back to the group as well. I did not look at this one. I looked at specifically some other components.
Okay. All right, so we can come back to this and provide a recommendation to the group if there are any changes here. The notes, apologies, in some ways when I was gone for the last couple months, I took over notes from some folks, and so there might be a couple crosshairs in this, the next couple sections. Hopefully
no problem.
So maybe I'll just ask, we'll go through kind of each section one by one and ask that if anybody who is in any of those conversations, subgroup conversations with staff has any specific items that they'd like to add, we can do that. So the next slide is 924, approval of code by city or county required. This was also a leave as is, as far as I am aware.
This one here, Adam, this is Claire. I think that we had settled this. There was questions about if it's locally adopted, does it need to be approved? And I think that we had gotten through that piece and that it makes sense. But if there's other questions from the committee, I certainly would be willing to either answer those or get back to the group as well.
There was one question that was on the March meeting minutes, and it's in the chat bar, is 920 through 927. If you wanted to just double check what the minutes said for all of those.
Is that something you can read really quick?
Well, it's longer because there's 3 sections there, but the question under 924. If you claim exempt status under ORS 476 and you don't modify that code, would you then also still be required to go to each city and county jurisdiction to have it resolved? Also, reach out to other organizations and see how they operate. Sorry, that part was they should also reach out.
So that would impact larger districts, maybe like the Clackamas or TVFNRs that serve multiple cities and multiple counties, and just potentially the staff work of going to every entity and getting the sign off. Is that what I'm hearing?
Sounds correct.
Yeah. Okay. but more work from the agency on that coming. Is that right, Adam?
We'll take another look at that and come back with more information at the next meeting.
Okay.
It sounds like there are a couple sections in that, the 920, 924, 927, that are all related to code. So we'll take a look at those and get back to this group.
Okay.
So I'm going to skip down. I'm going to skip down to 965 because I think that's the next one that. Okay. So I think 965 was the next section that I have here. 965 was the recovery by district of fire costs, suppressing unlawful fire and attorney's fees. This was something that OSFM was going to take a look at, and I believe, because this was related to recovery by district of costs, I think this was also going to go into the big picture bucket.
Okay. Any comments on that? Okay. More to come on that one.
And then the next one is 972, application by district to state fire marshal for identification name. And this one, along with the next two, are all connected. And I believe there was a conversation about kind of making some updates to all of these sections to make sure that the language just worked better in the modern way that we use it. And I don't know if folks want to talk a little bit more about that. Just to the group.
Yeah, I can jump into that. This one here we did look into. So Dr. Gimmel and I explored all sorts of options with this and really kind of dove back into the history of it. So, and really these kind of do groups. So 970, 478, 970, 478, 972, and 478, 980 really kind of go together. Those are the three that are in unison. And ultimately, I think in summary of what basically we found was really that this is the name of the districts was really a historical perspective. And so I think Chief Hussey had recommended that there was a change from, instead of district identification names, it would go to district identification, some kind of like unique identifier. And so ultimately we do track those not only through the name, that certainly continues to be an important component, but also a identification number is also assigned to it, so we can make sure that district information, we maintain the information for excuse me, each individual district using a number as well. The only piece that really fell outside of there was 478982. And after Dr. Gimmel and I reviewed that piece as well, that really is about the name. That's not about a unique identifier. So just that's really a gross summary, unless there's anything that you would want to add.
No, I think it captures, I think when we looked at it, we were looking like when these were created, the name was the unique identifier. And so one of the, I think what we're considering is just making that, instead of name, making it more ubiquitous, so it's more flexible, more modern, and just saying unique identifier, as opposed to just pigeoning us into the name, or it has to be a number, just something unique identifier.
Okay, I see Chief Ruiz Temple's hand up. Chief?
Thank you, Chief. It sounds like the recommendation from Chief Hussey was to add unique identifier. And I think, you know, the agency can take that and we could make that a recommendation. I think we don't need to wordsmith it. I would probably want to keep the name as part of this conversation and add unique identifier. I think that strengthens the reporting system and also the name structures. So if, 30 years from now, if somebody has another Camp Sherman or Sisters, right, we don't want to ever give it a connection to the previous entity. But I think what's important is in order to strengthen the Oregon fire reporting system and also use that for things such as grants, for funding, etc., we need the ability to modernize it. And I appreciate him bringing that up. And I think it could be easily added. The agency could easily add that if that's a recommendation.
Okay. So do we need action on that today, or is there more follow-up on that coming, do you think, Adam?
I believe that there's not necessarily more follow-up on that so much as just asking the committee to allow OSFM to move forward on updating that language. It sounds like it's not going to be controversial. It's really just making it flow and work with kind of the way the system works now, so that we're able to do our business.
Okay. That makes sense to me. Any comments from the committee on that?
One thumbs up.
Can I clarify? You were talking about 982, right? And talking about the name and or unique identify number?
Yeah, so it's a group of 972, 980, and 982. It's all three of those sections. So that essentially there's 980.
It's a group 970, 972, and 980. 982 is the end.
And just to Amanda, your statement, my suggestion for the council would be not and or, it would be and.
All right.
I think we've got it.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So we'll go to 990.
Yeah. And so the last section here is 990, which is penalties. And I think we took a quick look at this and decided that this might be something that we wanted to talk to DOJ on. Is that where we left this? And so we wanted to try to reach out to Christy, and we haven't done that yet, but talk to Christy about this section and how it works.
Okay, Christy probably hasn't had a chance to look at this one specifically yet. Have you,
No.
Christy?
I've not.
Just a reminder, Chief Darby also offered his assistance on that one.
So unless I
We want
hate
to
to,
bring this back next month, Adam?
yeah, I don't want to put Christy on the spot here, so maybe that's something we can bring back as long as unless anybody else has other questions or thoughts on this section before we move past it.
So place on my to-do list, ORS 478-990, but what exactly is the question that you're asking? I heard that you're concerned about how it's enforced.
I think if I could add to this, Christy, from my recollection, this is Claire again. I believe the question was related to a question from Chief Cook about how it's enforced. And so this is certainly something that's connected to local law enforcement, or I believe there's an opportunity for the fire board to be able to create some policy to allow a fire district to enforce this piece. But I think it's around how does this get done, and can a fire district enforce this, or does it have to be law enforcement? If I remember, that's where I think that nexus was.
Okay, so kind of just a practical question. Sure, it says it's a misdemeanor. How do we go about enforcing it and charging that?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. We'll find out.
Thank you, Christy.
All right, Chief Cook, I see your hand up there. Go ahead.
Yeah, in addition to that, the main challenge, as everybody understands with the smaller departments, is the board can very easily put in an ordinance that puts teeth to that so we're able to enforce it. The problem is the litigation, any tort or any litigation against some of these smaller districts that are bringing in $50,000, $100,000 would wipe them out. And so that has been the major issue of not putting teeth behind it. People are aware of this, but they can't put an ordinance in because they wouldn't be able to afford to enforce it. So what we do is we fall back and rely upon either law enforcement or the state fire marshal. So I don't know how to overcome that, but that's the main reason that people don't put ordinances in to enact this.
Okay. Christy, we'll do a little digging into it and maybe report back to us in May. Okay.
So that's the end of our sections. And we're really on to next steps.
All right. Thank you, Adam. Well, I think we're able to knock quite a few of those out today. And then we've got a few more for our homework that we'll address when we come back in May. And probably by the end of May, we'll likely have most of these addressed, other than the ones that are in the parking lot going forward, that will take a little more research and a longer range view on, I guess. So I feel pretty good about where we got today and the amount of work that's been done. And I think looking forward, right, our next meeting is going to be the 15th. Is that right, Adam? May 15th?
Yeah. Yep, that's correct, May 15th.
And that'll be an in-person meeting at OSFM, right?
Happy to host, absolutely.
Okay, all right. So look forward to seeing everybody there. And I think other work, we've got some different people working on cleaning up some of this. And I think on the 15th, we'll probably be digging into that dot exercise a little bit, won't we, Adam? I think that will be on the agenda for our work going forward. So I would say come to that meeting, just review those dots, sort of the priorities that we've discussed, some of the buckets that they're in, and come prepared to work at that meeting around those issues. That makes sense. And then Chief Ruiz-Temple and I have been invited to provide an update report on the committee's work to the Governor's Fire Service Policy Council on April 25th. They're just looking for a quick update about the work of the committee. And so we'll be able to provide that to the Governor's Fire Service Policy Council, which is great. Any other housekeeping items, Adam, or?
Not necessarily, just kind of a look down the road here, in addition to what we're looking at for the next meeting, which is really looking at those big bucket items, as you mentioned, Chief Johnson, and finishing, coming back on the items that we talked about today. As we move forward, we just have a few more months after that before the report back to the legislature is due in September. And so I think the conversation had been around, what that looks like. And I think in the month preceding our meeting, after our meeting next month, we'll be really getting that draft report started and worked on. And once that report is moved along a little bit, sharing it out with this group, talking about it in future months, and allowing this group to be able to share that report with the constituencies to get some buy-in before we move forward.
Yeah, sounds great, Adam. All right, Chief Medema, any last-minute thoughts for the group today?
Just appreciate all the good work, and thanks again. I feel like we're kind of closing out the review of the statutes, and as Adam articulated, as we move down the road, it's really the dot exercises, some of the bigger, larger aspirational pieces that are maybe challenges that we've identified in our review of these statutes, but may not be in these statutes. And so how do we capture those, and where do those fit in? And I really see that as the next kind of phase of the work of the group. So I'm looking forward to that and excited to close out this chapter and looking towards the next chapter, Chief.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Any last minute comments from committee members before we close out today? All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We got through there very efficiently today. We're ahead of schedule. Appreciate all the work, and look forward to seeing everybody in Salem on May 15th. So thank you.
Thank you.